Let's do this for the pure motivation of leading all limitless Mother and Father sentient beings to the ultimate. So today there's no particular topic. There's a bunch of short little things that I want to talk about. We'll hope it turns into something, although it might not. But when a person becomes a spiritual seeker, the first thing they have to do is look around and gather information from the various teachings and lineages and so on that are available. And eventually you settle on the one that seems right for you, a lineage and a teacher. And the first point I want to make is that a teacher is really essential. It has happened in various times and places that people have attained enlightenment without a teacher, although many times they're just re-attaining it, having attained it in a previous life. But in certain Westerners, there's a great resistance to the hierarchical nature of the lineage and the teachers in the lineage. There are a lot of people that I've known over the last 50 years who won't take a teacher because they don't want, they have this idea that everybody's pretty much the same, and they don't want to have a teacher who's at a higher level than them. But trying to do the Dharma independently without a teacher is very, 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 very difficult. The path is counterintuitive most of the time, meaning that you often have to do what you don't think you should do and what you really don't want to do. For example, if you have a traumatic experience when you're young, and it's more than you can handle, and you repress that traumatic experience, then generally your mind constructs all sorts of warnings around that. Don't go there, no matter what, don't go there. And the path is to go there. And so if you're going on your own, uh, that's quite difficult to do over and over and over, to do the things that are against your better judgment or counterintuitive to how you think things should unfold. So the first thing is that one needs a teacher. Hopefully that teacher is part of a lineage. And then a very important step, which doesn't get mentioned very much, is that to really cease being an outsider in that teaching, one should take refuge with the teacher. You take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I remember that the first time I met Sidney Rinpoche, the first question he asked was, who did you take refuge with? You know, and so particularly in Vajrayana, it's very important that you take refuge, otherwise you remain a bit of an outsider. And you should take refuge with your main teacher. And if you haven't done that, you should do it soon. Then the next really, really, really important thing is aspiration. You need to aspire to the various goals, even though eventually we have to drop all goals and so on. In the beginning, we need to be very clear that we want to attain enlightenment. We have to be very clear in that aspiration. And in most of the practices that are in the text, we say that over and over again, may I attain Buddhahood in order to help all other beings without exception attain Buddhahood. But you need to develop that aspiration to awaken and once awake to help other beings awake. So what you find in the West in the modern times is that people don't develop a clear aspiration because they have the mistaken idea that desire, including desire for enlightenment, is a bad thing. So one time I was with Namjal and somebody was talking about this, and Namjal said something like, "Let me be perfectly clear. Craving for enlightenment is the path. Nobody achieves it by accident. Nobody sort of stumbles and falls into enlightenment. You have to want it, and you have to want it quite badly. There's a saying in Zen that in order to attain enlightenment, you have to want it as bad as a drowning man going down for the third time wants air. So don't cling to any delusion that desire for enlightenment is a bad thing. Now, normally what happens is that shortly before enlightenment, this desire for enlightenment that has brought you to this point just before enlightenment, the desire for enlightenment falls away. And at the moment of enlightenment, there will be no desire for enlightenment, but you need the desire for enlightenment to get you to that point. And one of my teachers told me that, he must have been quite mathematically inclined because he said 98% of beings who reach very close to enlightenment, the desire for the enlightenment falls away on its own. And in 2%, it doesn't. And in those 2%, they don't attain enlightenment in this lifetime. The desire for enlightenment forgot to fall away, and it prevents them from attaining enlightenment. So what happens is in their next life, when they encounter Dharma, but they're not craving enlightenment at that point, they very often just awaken on the very first hearing of Dharma. I've known one person who did that in this life. As an old friend of mine, I haven't seen that person for decades, but she had awakening the very first Dharma talk she went to. And the most famous example of that is I think he was the sixth patriarch of Zen. His name was Wei Ning. And he was in the marketplace one day, and somebody was chanting the Diamond Sutra. And Wei Ning in that life had no religious training, had never meditated, had never done anything. And he heard 4 lines of the Diamond Sutra and he awoke. And the story would be then that he had somehow done the work in a previous lifetime, but had not given up the desire for enlightenment. So he awoke very easily, and he went on to become the sixth and last patriarch of Zen, I believe, in China. So form a strong aspiration to awaken in order to help all other beings awaken. And you can also have other things in your aspiration. One aspect I have in my aspiration, when I was young, I had a lot of friends who had mental disease of various kinds. Most of them had schizophrenia. And And I saw all the terrible things that they went through when they decompensated. And I noticed that in the Dharma, I never saw any Dharma teachers going out of their way to help the mentally ill. So part of my aspiration is to awaken in order to help all other beings awaken, but to also develop some skill in helping those with mental illness, because I don't see anybody else focused on that. And, like Akshobhya, before he was fully enlightened, he focused on hatred which had arisen in him, and made a vow that he would never, ever, 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 ever hate again. And so he had an aspiration to awaken in order to help all other beings, but in particular to do that by overcoming hatred. So he's now one of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, the one who represents transcending hatred. So you can have other things in your aspiration, but it should always include wanting to awaken with some urgency in order to help all other beings awaken whenever you can. Once you have that aspiration, then the question is, what do you do? So there's a word in the ancient Indian languages, sila, which is usually translated as morality. And I was with Tsultrim on a number of occasions when the question of morality came up, and he told me, I really hate talking about morality in the West, because as soon as you mention it, a shiver goes up everybody's spine because of all the guilt we've had laid on us over the centuries. But sila, in the original ancient Indian languages, the word sila, before it became a Dharma word, meant cooling. And so morality has an aspect of allowing your mind to cool, meaning allowing it to be able to relax and not have all kinds of fiery thoughts going on. But as a Dharma word or Dharma concept, sila in Buddhism is sort of unique among religions in that there is no uh, uh, morality in Buddhism is simply doing what's helpful to yourself or others and avoiding doing what's harmful to yourself or others. But there's no list of um, things you exactly can't do. And the idea is that you really should treat every situation as unique. And you should, in that situation, then figure out what's helpful, what's harmful, and do the helpful thing and don't do the harmful thing. Um, there are some basic things, though, that are mentioned in the precepts, like killing, stealing, lying, those sort of things, and so so we're encouraged to take the precepts to train to refrain from doing those. But unlike some other religions, it's not like if you make a mistake and break a precept, other than maybe killing, that you're all of a sudden a bad person. It's not a guilt-oriented teaching. It's a training teaching that you recognize the value in becoming a, a virtuous person who doesn't kill, doesn't lie, doesn't steal, and things like that. And so you train to become better in that. And every once in a while, you make a mistake and you learn from that, and you continue to train to become closer to perfection. Now, Sila, one time Tsultrim was in Vancouver, and I was in Vancouver, and he was giving talks at 3 or 4 different venues, and I went to them all. And before this retreat or teaching, I was contemplating the role of Sila in Dharma, because if it's taught usually near the beginning. And so in each one of the talks in Vancouver that particular year, in the middle of the talk, Tsultrim stopped whatever he was talking about and said, don't underestimate the importance of Sila. He said, Sila is the foundation for all spiritual progress. And if you don't have good Sila and you think you're going to somehow move along the path, you're deluding yourself. It's absolutely necessary to have a calm, clear, pure mind in order for spiritual progress, and especially for the higher levels of spiritual progress. So it's worth studying what Sila is really about in Buddhism, and if possible, going beyond the guilt mongering that some of us were exposed to in other religions. Then once you have a teacher, a lineage, you've taken refuge, you've developed Sila, then the main practice includes the practice of mindfulness or awareness. And so one should then develop that. In Theravada, there are lots of practices like Vipassana, Anapanasati, Satipatthana, that are just basically bare awareness practice. But even in the Vajrayana practice, awareness is included in all of them in some way. It may not be talked about, it may not be emphasized, but it's in there. And then your task becomes to become aware of patterns that are happening in you that you're not aware of. And those are many. There's a lot of unconscious drivers that run people's lives, and people are not aware of what's going on. But I just want to talk a little bit about one ubiquitous pattern that happens, and that's, and in most Dharma practitioners, it falls under the radar. It's not noticed, and mindfulness is not practiced on it. And this is the pattern of evaluation. So everything that arises, everything that happens, our training from samsara, from beginningless time, is to look at it, analyze it, and evaluate it. And then, having seen what it is according to our perception, we then react to it. And we then act on that reaction. So you're walking somewhere, something appears in front of you, you analyze it, evaluate it, and judge it. Oh, this is a good thing, or this is not a good thing, or I don't care about this thing at all. And then you have some reaction to that and you act on it. And this particular pattern is almost ubiquitous in humans, and it's also ubiquitous in animals. But most people who are practicing awareness don't notice this pattern. And the result of this pattern is that you are a slave to your conditioning, because all of your reactions are based in your conditioning, and your conditioning is what happened when something similar arose in the past, and what did I do? And an enlightened person's approach to every situation is to treat it as fresh and new, and not invoke any memories about anything similar that happened in the past, to just be free to act fresh and new in every situation. And so I think this is a very important pattern to learn to watch in yourself, to recognize it and watch it. And you don't have to necessarily do anything about it, but you should notice when something new arises in front of you that, well, you look at it and you start to analyze it and figure out what it is. And at some point you pass judgment on it. Oh, this is bad, I better get away from it. Or this is good, I better go into it and get more of it. Or this is indifferent, I don't care whether it's here or not, I'm just not interested. And then based on that judgment, we may pursue whatever it is, or we may run away from whatever it is, or we may ignore whatever it is. And so in doing that, we've given up our freedom, and we've given up any chance of just being naturally in the moment. When you're using your entire past history as a basis for reacting to and then acting on whatever that reaction is, you're not in the moment, you know? So, for example, supposing when you were young, you were walking on a dark street and you got assaulted or something bad happened, and now you're as an adult, you're walking on a dark street, but you're in a safe neighborhood, and nothing's going to happen, and you're more able to defend yourself. But you will still treat that dark street like the dark street from 40 years ago when something bad happened to you there. That's not freedom. That's not being in the moment. So then you're practicing awareness. You start to observe your mind and body. You observe everything that goes on in the body that you can be aware of, and you observe everything that goes on in your mind, and you notice the interaction between the mind and body. And uh, uh, so by being aware, mindful of and aware of mind and body, you start to notice things you've never noticed before. You start to have insights about the nature of mind and body and what's going on. Now, I want to talk a little bit about unconscious drivers. Um, uh, there are two types, those that have their origin in this lifetime and those that have their origin in some previous lifetime. So, for example, if as a child uh, you were not loved by your parents, then as an adult, uh, you will try to win their love even if they're dead. And you will do things, you will do good deeds, and you will accomplish things, and your whole life will be driven by this desire to have been loved, even though the people who didn't love you may not be around to ever change. They may have died or whatever, but people can have uh, uh, people can be driven by things, especially from childhood, quite easily. For example, when I was born in the 1940s, uh, doctors told women who had children, who had newborn children, just feed them breast milk for 2 years and don't ever feed them any solid food under any circumstances. And also only feed them every 4 hours. And if they cry in between time, just let them cry it out. So for the first year and a half of my life, I was okay for about 6 months or something, but after a while, I was hungry all the time, and I would cry, and I wouldn't get anything. Nothing would happen because my mother was following the directions of the doctors, and so finally, when I was born in 1943, and in the middle of 1945, uh, the Second World War ended in Europe. Victory in Europe Day, VE Day. And my mother and father, who were young adults, wanted to go. We were in Edmonton, and they wanted to go to downtown Edmonton to celebrate VE Day with the crowd. And they got this old Ukrainian woman to babysit me. And 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 I cried, and she figured out what was going on. My mother had given her instructions: don't feed them and all that sort of stuff. And but she was from a different background, and so uh, she cooked me some Ukrainian sausage and fed it to me. And it was the first time in a year that I entered a state of not being hungry. After that, my mother fed me. So what happened was when I grew up, I noticed this when I was a teenager that teenagers make plans sort of often on the spot. So I'd be with my friends, and we'd all of a sudden decide we're going to go somewhere and do something. And and each one of them was just ready to go. But with me, it was always, oh, well, there might not be food there available. I better eat something before I go. So I'd grab something out of the fridge and eat it. And then later on, um, when I reached my late teens and early 20s, I noticed that I was hungry 100% of the time, and eating did not take away the hunger. And as a result, I have the kind of body I have now. Uh, Eating all the time without any limits is not a really solid plan for having a great body. So don't imitate that by any means. But all of this was from the starvation that I had as a child. And it took me a long time I didn't actually get to the bottom of it until I was in my 50s when I finally uh, got fully in touch with this unconscious driver, and it ceased to be a driver. Um, so that was something that had its origin in childhood, and it drove me, and it drove me in ways that were harmful to myself, and it drove me, even though I was practicing mindfulness all the time, I was very, very slow to tune into that. behavior. And it was only because I noticed that I did some things different than my friends that I was able to figure out that was a pattern, which is one of the tips for finding hidden drivers. Is if you behave in a way completely different from how everybody else behaves, maybe there's something going on there and you can look into it. Now, I'll give you an example of an unconscious driver from a previous lifetime. Uh, uh, maybe 500 years ago, I was a female, and a marriage was arranged for me to a man who had a ranch in a remote area and not close to anything. And so I was transported to the nearest town, and then he came into town on horseback, and we got married in the town, and then we went out to the ranch, and that's where we lived. And we had children and raised a family. And it turned out that as a woman, I actually fell in love with this man who was my husband. And it became very important for me to know whether he loved me. And we were extremely poor, and he was always restless. He was always looking at the horizon like he'd rather be someplace else. And I could never tell whether he wanted to go someplace else because he didn't like being with me, or simply because he wanted to experience life, and we had very little opportunity for variety on our ranch in the wilderness. And so this became a very important thing for me to know whether I was loved or not. But he was a man who didn't admit to ever having any feelings about anything. And he would absolutely refuse to talk about it at all, ever. And on his deathbed, he was lying there, and all of a sudden he woke up and he was lucid. And I told him it was really important for me to know how he felt about me. And he looked at me, and he was lucid for a while, didn't say a word, and then he died. So at the end of that life, that feeling of not being lovable went unconscious as a driver. And so in this life, when I was young, I could tell in my mind that I was convinced that I was unlovable. And when I was young, I had various girlfriends and things like that. And every girlfriend I had wanted to be with me forever. And obviously, some of them loved me and so on. But knowing that had absolutely no effect on this formation at all. And so when I was in my 40s, maybe, and I wasn't a monk, uh, I met a woman, and we seemed to have some connection with each other. And so we got together. But I went into a very, very strange state of mind shortly after us getting together, and such that she didn't want to be around me. And I didn't know what was going on. So I went home and meditated on it and realized that she was my husband in that former life, the one who wouldn't tell me whether he loved me or not. And so I had become very emotionally uncomfortable around her and couldn't express anything. So I told her about it, and she found it interesting, but she didn't have any memory of that life. And we just sort of mutually parted. And then about 2 years later, I was taking a bus home, and it was midnight, and I got on the last bus run of the day, and she was the driver. And the bus was empty, and it was a full moon night, and it was summer, and it was really nice. And so I sat up front. We had just the greatest conversation ever. And the connection between us was just so strong. And we got to the end of the line, and we kept talking for a while. And then I got off of the bus and started to walk away. And buses, when they put their brakes on or take their brakes off, there's a big squishing of air, from their air brakes or whatever it is. And so I started to walk away, and I heard the squishing of air, meaning she had taken off her brakes, and she was now going to start driving back to turn in the bus for the night. And she went about 2 feet and then stopped. And then there was all this squishing again of air. So I turned around to see what happened, and she had rolled her window down. And she called me by name. And from the bottom of her heart, she said, "I love you." And I exploded, and that was the absolute end of that formation. Um, and she didn't say "I love you" in the sense of we should get together, but I don't know where it came from, but it was absolute perfect, and that was the end of that unconscious driver that had driven me for 500 years. Um, and I could give you a ton of other examples from past lives, but I'm not going to go into them. Uh, so so you will meet people occasionally that are just absolutely driven to do something. Maybe they're driven to make money, or maybe they're driven to win the love and respect of the people around them, or maybe they're driven for something else. Some are driven for fame. Uh, uh, I knew one guy who had a very bad childhood, and he used to say frequently, "I absolutely have to become a doctor or a dentist." And what was driving him was he had not got any respect as a child, and he thought if he attained, and this is all in the unconscious, he thought if he became a doctor or a dentist, he would become respected. And that was driving him. And it wasn't that he wanted to be a doctor or a dentist, but he was craving this respect that he had never got. Uh, so, so you use your mindfulness to eventually become aware of these drivers. And it turns out with unconscious drivers that they contain a strategy for you rectifying whatever was missing that is driving you. But it turns out the strategies are infantile. They're really, 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 really stupid. And when your awareness finally brings them into the light of day, you look at them, you cannot believe that something so stupid was driving you. And and it just vanishes and goes away. So one of our jobs as a Dharma practitioner, although you don't ever really have to think about this or whatever is, but one of our jobs is to clear out the unconscious. We have all kinds of repressed trauma in there. We have things that drive us. We have all kinds of things in the unconscious, and so one of the things that happens on the path quite naturally is that you get in touch with all of those, bring them out into the open, and then they heal and go away and don't bother you anymore. And then when all of that is done, you attain freedom. You're not driven by all these things in your past that happened that had some adverse effect on you and you couldn't deal with properly. So you put it into the unconscious and put safeguards around it so your mind would never go there, you know. Um, Another driver that is ubiquitous in humans is the constant drive to improve. And by that, I mean to improve your situation. So I, in the past, have given assignments to my students to, when the opportunity presents, to go home and sit on the couch and don't do anything and see what happens. Well, what happens in the mind is that the mind says, oh, well, this is nice sitting on the couch, but it would be better if I had a cup of tea, or it would be better if I put the TV on, or it would be better if I read a book, or it would be better if I phoned one of my friends, or maybe invited somebody over. And what happens in humans is that we have a situation, the situation might be perfectly good, but our mind is always looking for some way to improve it. And we do that in one of two ways, either by getting something that we want or that we like, or by getting rid of something that we don't like or that annoys us or we don't want to be around. And this is the attraction aversion mechanism. It's very fundamental to human behavior. And when people who are practicing mindfulness uh, uh, engage in this, they frequently just think it's natural and they don't bother to be mindful of the mechanism. And as a result, the mechanism carries on, taking away your ability to just relax into what is. Real awareness is being present with awareness with whatever is. And being free of the urge to improve it. So try it sometime when you have the opportunity. When you go home, you sit on the couch, you're by yourself, and just sit there and relax into reality and see what happens. See how long it lasts. One teacher I knew used to do something very interesting. Uh, Excuse me a minute. Hello. Bye. Sorry, that was a medical appointment. I had to take it. So what this one teacher I knew did was, and he was a fully enlightened teacher, is he would uh, guide his students in a guided meditation until they were in a state of great clarity and great relaxation. pretty much a transcendental state. And then he would say, stay like that forever. But if something comes along and takes you out of this state, notice what it is and write it down. And when you come back next time, tell me. So the purpose of this was to show people how they sell out eternal bliss, what they sell it out for. And they don't sell it out for creating eternal peace on the planet. They don't sell it out for ending all wars. They don't sell it out for feeding all the hungry people in the world. They sell it out for, oh, I have to remember to get a loaf of bread. uh, I have to remember to go to bed early tonight because I have to get up early tomorrow. Um, uh, I have to remember that it's my brother's birthday next week. They sell out for relatively trivial worldly things. You can try it sometime. You can somehow get yourself into an exalted state with the intention of staying there forever and see what happens. You know. So meditation is really resting with awareness in whatever is. And that means no judgment, no evaluation, no attempt to recreate a previously pleasant state, no attempt to avoid a previously unpleasant state, no attempt to do anything, just to be with what is. And some of what is you won't like. Some of what is you will love and form great attachment to it. But just to be with what is. Any questions? Brian?
Well, it's not so much a question as an observation that when you took that phone call, it was brilliant teaching because I found my mind going, this isn't supposed to be happening. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be happening. Normally, I let everybody know what my schedule is and so on. But home support was here a while ago and they referred me to somebody with special skills. And then that person was just told to call me sometime and set up an appointment. And that's what this call was. And I didn't feel like, I was hoping it was just going to go quickly, but I didn't feel I could say, don't call me now,
No, I think it was a brilliant continuation of your teaching.
Any other questions or comments? How many of you have taken refuge in the lineage?
Yes.
Yeah.
But Lama, I haven't taken refuge with you. I took it with Mingyur Rinpoche. So how would your students take refuge with you?
Well, they would ask for it, but there's a rule in the Karmakaju lineage. You can always go up, but you can't go down. So if you take refuge with Mingyur Rinpoche, you don't need to take it with me. And if we could find somebody lower than me, you wouldn't take it with them either. But you could always go up. You could take it with Sidney Rinpoche or with the Karmapa. But if you took it with Mingyur Rinpoche, you don't need to take it with anybody else.
Okay, thank you.
And one of our sangha just had an interview with Mingyur Rinpoche 2 days ago in New York. Yeah.
I have a question, Lama Sidney.
Yeah.
What if you took refuge with someone who is passed? Like I did it at a Vipassana, but it's with a Goenka Vipassana. So I've done that every time, but he's not alive anymore. And wasn't when I took refuge.
Did you take refuge with a monk?
It was the Vipassana teachers at the Vipassana centers.
But not a monk.
I believe some of them are monks, but they're not in the Vajrayana. They're in a different lineage.
Yeah, well, in general, you want to take refuge with an ordained person, and the lineage doesn't matter that much, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, unless there's one last comment or question, let's wrap it up. And, yeah, Randall.
Yes, I'm just thinking how you sort of oops. I'm just thinking of like pledges and oaths that are annually celebrated or renewed or something like this. And is this outside of that sort of thing where you go to refuge one time with one person and that's it? Would like a refresher or a new take or a new situation offer maybe a deeper asking or ceremony for refuge at a later time in the life? Would it be irrelevant for that?
Yeah, you don't, there's no absolute need for refreshing refuge, but you can do it if the teacher will allow it. So I took refuge in the 1960s with my teacher in Thailand, but in the late 1990s, when I was first with Sidney Rinpoche, I decided to take refuge again, and he allowed that. So, yeah. But it's not necessary, you know.
What got you to ask refuge again? What motivated you then?
Well, I didn't know whether you needed to take refuge in the specific lineage, so ignorance was my main driver, you know. But I thought it can't do any harm, but maybe that will help me become part of the Karmakaju lineage, you know.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
If you go back far enough, just about everything I did was a mistake. So who knows if that was a mistake or not? I don't know. Okay, well, let's dedicate any merit up to now from all sources and times to all of you and to all beings that each without exception attain the ultimate for themselves. Thanks for coming.